I'm very, very lucky to be able to participate and have a chat with you today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but circumstances obviously dictate. Otherwise, I would have been there like you are, with bells on and with great excitement. So I will try my best to convey both my excitement for what you're doing today, my interest in what you're doing, and certainly my enthusiasm to help you be successful as you take this journey of, but perhaps have already taken the journey of social enterprise. But just quickly, before I start and get into the details of the presentation, I realize obviously you're on the schedule and you're tight with time, so I will stick to my allotted time. I certainly hope I'm not the guy standing between you and lunch. I know that's always a bad presentation to be doing. So I promise it'll be quick, it'll be interesting, I hope, and I'm certainly hoping to continue the conversation with any of you after today as well. So by way of introduction, very quickly, I had the benefit, like you, of being looked after by the Canon Collins Trust when I was a student in London. I was there on the Nelson Mandela Scholarship. I'm not sure if any of the Mandela alumni are with you today. And I was at LSE between 2004 and 2005, after which I came back to South Africa, worked at Vodacom and Standard Bank, and both of those are relevant to the conversation today, maybe particularly the work that I was doing at Standard Bank, which was one in the retail banking, on mobile banking, and the second was in business banking and working out how to finance black-owned small businesses with kind of under the BEE, the Black Economic Empowerment Act, but we were looking for commercial opportunities of how to do that. So I didn't work in transformation or corporate social investment. I worked in commercial banking, and that was our job to figure out how to finance small businesses. So that's relevant for today. And then I went on to do my PhD in financial inclusion, and there I looked at ways in which we extend financial services to previously excluded. So I have a deep interest, like you do in the room today, about how can we solve social problems through using alternative ways of thinking and models and approaches, and so this is an area of deep interest for me. I will switch now to the slides, so you won't see my morning face anymore. So let me continue with the presentation from the slides now. I'd like to do it the following way. So I'm going to go through the presentation fairly quickly, and then I maybe would like to leave it open for some questions, if you think that is feasible as well in terms of the time. But I will stick to my allotted half hour. So let's get into it. I think this is going to hopefully spark some ideas and some thoughts for you. We are, of course, talking about financing the social enterprise. So I understood that the bulk of your conversations today have been about some of the great ideas and sharing some of the ideas with colleagues and fellow alumni who've been through this. And so we've really been talking about some of these ideas and opportunities already. When I looked at your agenda, when Julian sent me the agenda originally, and Nadia was talking through what you were thinking of doing, the thought I had immediately was to offer the other side of the coin, essentially, if you like, if you pardon the metaphor of coins and money. But if you're talking about social enterprise, then we must really talk about social impact investments, or at least, even more broadly, how to finance social enterprise. So that really is the topic of the conversation today. And I thought let's start with a story. One of these, you should be seeing a slide right now called Jump Credit. Now, Jump Credit is an interesting little startup, which is here in Boston, actually, because it is a social enterprise in the very essence of that word. It set itself up. So can I assume that the conversation already has taken place about the definition of social enterprises and the difference between social enterprises and for-profits and then not-for-profits as well? Yep. So that sort of spectrum of business types is really being discussed.
Yep.
Now, Jump Credit is a social enterprise that has set itself up to help Americans improve their credit scores. Credit scores are a really big deal in this context because it is the thing that not only helps you access finance, in other words, get loans and so on, so this is one of the things that the lenders and the bankers look at, but more and more it is being used for other purposes as well. So Job applications, people will sometimes look at your credit score. If you apply for an apartment, or if you want to rent an apartment, they will also look at your credit score. So it's a kind of shorthand ticket in the American context for sort of a validity of your capability to pay, or your history to pay. In South Africa, we have credit scores as well. It's just we don't treat them with quite the veneration that the Americans do. But the credit bureau in South Africa, so TransUnion, Experian, CompuScan, XDS, all of those, they do collect credit data. They do compile credit scores. They do sell them to the banks. So whether we know it as South Africans or not, this is happening in the background to the banks and the credit bureau and all the retail credit providers and so on as well. So why is Jump Credit a social enterprise? Is because it set itself up to solve a big social problem that mostly low-income Americans have the lowest credit scores, which means that their credit is more expensive than most people. It also means that by and large, if you're an African American with a low credit score, you're going to struggle to rent an apartment. You're going to struggle to get a job. And so Jump Credit stepped into that social gap and set itself up for solving that social problem. So I think this is an interesting case study that really highlights a couple of important themes for me. One is it has clearly been identified a social problem that it wants to solve, and it is solving it in a commercial way. And that for me is the sort of sweet spot of social enterprise. Now, Jump Credit didn't do this alone, and I'm sorry for this busy slide, but I literally pulled exactly out of this competition that Jump Credit was in over at the Harvard Innovation Labs. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, this logo here, the logo says hi, it's for Harvard's Innovation Lab. And Jump Credit was one of these 36 social impact education and cultural teams competing for the $310,000, what we potentially could call either donation or seed funding. So it illustrates the point that social enterprises have got multiple options of how to get themselves financed. This in particular was a competition that Harvard set up for its students to be able to access financing through a particular challenge fund that the university had set up. So by way of introducing the idea that access to finance is really critical for the success of social enterprises and any startup or any business. Certainly that is incredibly important. And that is the topic of what we want to talk about today. But that example that I've shared with you now of Jump Credit illustrates a range of other important elements as well in terms of ensuring success for your social enterprise. So if you look at what you should be seeing now is a slide that has just 3 bullet points. One is called access to markets, the second one is called access to business development support, and the third and final one is access to finance, which is essentially the topic of what we want to talk about today. But as a banker, when I was with Standard Bank for those 5 years trying to build out a commercial model for enterprise development, these were the things that we learned as bankers we needed to create for small enterprises to be successful. Yes, sure. When bankers enter the room and we enter the conversation, we're expected to have a financial conversation. And yes, we can have those. But we found in developmental finance, in building new enterprises, that we needed to, as bankers, ensure that the enterprises that we were aiming to finance had a very, very clear access to market strategy. What does access to market mean? In the nature of the enterprise development business that we're building for Standard Bank, Standard Bank, as you know, is a full service bank. So we work in Standard Bank from retail to business to corporate. So it has a full set of clients across the country, across any spectrum of the economy. Access to markets for small businesses, in our definition, was ensuring that those small businesses were embedded into corporate value chains. What does that mean? Well, simply put, there are 4 different kinds of value chains that small businesses enter, or relationships that small businesses enter into with big corporations. The first and most obvious one is suppliers. So small businesses can be suppliers to big business. So the second one is, so if you're a supplier, you can also be a customer. So you can buy, as a customer, buy goods and services from corporations. The third way in which corporations can ensure access to markets for small businesses is to set up a distribution relationship with those small businesses. So you're the corporation and you distribute your products through a small business, or you use a small business in a fashion that provides logistics to your value chain. So think about Coca-Cola or SAB Miller, ABI, so that distribution relationship. And the fourth way of ensuring access to markets is through franchises. So think about KFC or McDonald's. That franchisor relationship is another form of access to markets. So access to markets is a really important aspect to ensuring the viability and sustainability of any enterprise. And it's a critical factor to think about as you're planning for your social enterprise as well, and at least planning for how you're going to finance this. So, as developmental finance professionals in the bank, we were looking to ensure that businesses had access to finance. When those businesses did not have access to finance, we would literally engineer that they would get access to finance or work with the corporations that we were banking in corporate investment banking to open up those value chain opportunities for small enterprises. Highly interventionist, but extremely important. It's not only do we do it for the benefit of the small business, but we do it as a risk mitigant for the banks as well. So when we're lending to a business, what we want to ensure is that they have solid access to markets, because that is a risk mitigant for the lending that we're going to be doing into that small enterprise. On to the second one very quickly, access to business development support. Very, very important. And that case that I just showed you now of Jump Credit illustrates this one, which is Jump Credit embedded itself inside the Harvard Innovation Lab because of this particular point, business development support. What does that refer to? Any business and any entrepreneur is going to need support. And what I find very, very exciting and very interesting about the American context is the extent to which they have facilities and capabilities in this space to enable startups, social enterprises, new businesses to be successful. The extent of business development support that I observe in this context is astounding. And it's not to be discounted. And what do we mean more specifically by business development support? Well, these are people who can help you think about your strategy, your marketing, your legal, your HR, your IT, your accounting, all of those important business skills that any single entrepreneur is not necessarily going to have by themselves, but they're going to be relying on a network of support. If any of you come from big corporations, all of this stuff is done in-house for you. If, for example, you worked at a big bank, you have an internal legal team, you have marketing, you've got HR, you've got IT. As a small business owner, as a small enterprise, this is an important gap that we often find when we're looking to finance small businesses, because we are looking for certain skills and expertise, and these small businesses very often don't have them. So the big question we were asking in enterprise development was, how do we put these capabilities and skills against these businesses so that we give them a better chance at success? Right. So we've got those two enablers in place: access to markets, access to business development support. And finally, let's move on to access to finance, which is really the core of what we want to talk about. But I wanted to make sure that when we talk about finance, we're talking about understanding that it is not the only thing that ensures the success of small enterprises or social enterprises or any small business. It has to happen in this engineered context of access to markets, access to business development support, and then finally access to finance. So, just a sip of coffee there. In terms of access to finance, when you're thinking about approaching or thinking through your finance and who to approach and what kind of finance, I'll show you some very exciting, maybe some obvious options first of what those financial options could be, what those financial structures could be, and then some very new ones that we're observing coming into the market. So we'll get on to the very specific types of finance. But before we even approach any financier, funder, donor, or any startup fund or anything like that, there's a couple of things that you need to be clear about, I believe, as you approach that step in your journey, as you're in the life of your social enterprise. The first one for me is exceptionally important about clarity of purpose, and that's what I've called here, what is your strategic intent? Because if you're clear and crisp about what it is that contribution is that you want to make, to society, what is the social problem that you want to solve? And you have that very clearly figured out about the contribution that you want to make. It also starts to narrow the range of funders that you will then engage with. You need to be clear about what it is about your purpose, and you'll find funders to match that purpose. What you essentially want to do is not compromise what it is that you originally set out to do with what the funders' intentions are. I think that's incredibly critical. And you have, at the moment, I believe, the luxury to be able to be strategic and be clever and clear about who it is that you approach based on what your strategic intent is. And I'll show you some examples of funds that have been set up for very specific objectives, right? And so, for example, the extent to which you're able to, one, identify what your strategic intent is, but secondly, be able to link it to the broader developmental discourse that is happening globally right now around the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals for the United Nations. That language around SDGs is becoming pervasive, not only in social enterprises, but also I'm finding more and more with the corporations and the clients that we consult to as Intellidex. So we're being asked more and more the question about how to align even existing listed companies' corporate strategies to the SDGs that the UN is promoting. So why is this important for a social enterprise? Is because let's say, for example, you want to work in early childhood education. Well, SDG 2 is all about good education and access to good opportunities. So be clear about what it is that you intend to do. Be clear, understand where the language and the discourse is in the funding sphere, and make sure that you make those links explicit, because that will be a very, very empowering path that you then go down as you look for specific funders that work in that specific vertical that your business is intending to solve for as well. The second dimension here is in terms of your legal status. Now, this is going to be informed by that conversation that you had earlier in the room about what are the various forms of business that you can set up. And legal status, we've got many different options now, and certainly one exciting one which empowers social enterprises in the United States is one called benefit corporations, or B Corps. Can I just see by maybe show of hands if anybody's heard of that, or whether it's present in South Africa? I'm not sure. I've been waiting too long.
No, it's not present here.
We don't have it there yet. No. Okay. So, in other words, what you need to be clear about is what is your legal status going to be? Are you a not-for-profit, or are you going to be a for-profit? What we're seeing with the B corporations is that they're sort of sitting between those two. And the reason that the B corporations or the benefit corporations exist is because, unlike a full for-profit, they can subordinate shareholder value to social value. If you're a full for-profit, you have to subordinate any other strategic intent to shareholder profit. B corporations can circumvent that regulation and say, sorry shareholders, we actually are aiming, or we're redirecting our funds to solving the social problem, and they can legitimately and legally do that. So that's an important legal status. It also sets them apart from the not-for-profits. Now, how does legal status tie back to your financing? Is because you will be eligible for or be excluded from certain forms of financing based on your legal status. So if you're a not-for-profit, the venture capitalists are not going to look at you, for example. If, however, you're a for-profit, you are going to, or at least if you're setting it up as a non-profit, you can then go after donor funding and foundation funding and so on. If you're a for-profit, that or at least a B Corp, then you have other options that you explore. So after your strategic intent, what is your legal status and what's the legal status that empowers you to achieve your vision? That you have to be clear about. And again, that's then puts you down a certain path of the kind of financing that you can go after. And the final dimension of consideration as you think about financing your social enterprise is going to be the life stage of your enterprise. I was very excited to see from the speakers and the list today that some people have already been at this for a while, and they have had their social enterprises running for a while. Nadia being one example. That life stage of the social enterprise will then also determine the kind of finance you go after and the kind of capital structure that you put in place for your business. So, by way of illustration, when we're talking about, and I have to do this a lot as a banker, explain to people why banks don't lend to startups. Banks need to see, when we start lending money, so loan financing is credit financing is one option for enterprises, is we need to see a lot of history of business performance. Because we're putting capital at risk as banks. And so we want to see that we've had a track record of performance. You've got customers, you've got revenue. We can assess your income statement. We can assess your cash flow statement. We can assess your balance sheet. We can assess your collateral for the loan. And so banks really come in at the later stage, lending. What we're talking about here today is a much earlier stage. So you're at the birth stage, or at the seed stage, or the startup stage. Your capital structure is going to be very, very different. So my first point of caution about seeking access to finance is, if I were you, I wouldn't waste my time going to the banks for a loan. It is a bad idea. You're going to get yourself into a very bad position if you even secure that loan, because you simply don't have the cash flows to pay back that loan. Bad idea to go after a loan. But certainly you have many, many other options available to you as an early stage business. So let's look at what some of those are. I'll talk to you very quickly about each one of these, and I'll introduce them and won't spend too much time on the detail. Firstly, there's venture capital. I thought, let me start with the stuff that people potentially have already heard about, and then move into things that are maybe a little bit more experimental and that's still relevant for what you need to think about. So let's talk about venture capital, and I'll share with you what's happening in maybe some parts of South Africa, but certainly across the African continent with venture capital and what we're seeing now and the trends. We'll talk about what seed capital is and why that's different from venture capital. We'll talk about revenue. And then we'll move on to talk about what are now called direct public offerings. And has anybody heard of DPOs, direct public offerings? Show of hands? No?
No hands.
None in the room. Okay. Has everybody heard of IPOs, initial public offerings, when companies list on the stock exchange?
Yep.
Yep, okay. DPOs are a form of an IPO, but they're just a little bit different. It's a very specific kind of crowdsourcing or crowdfunding that we're seeing emerging in the United States now for social enterprises, startups, non-profits. Many people are starting to do what are called direct public offerings, and that's a very exciting one for you to explore as well. We'll talk a little bit about social impact bonds and how you can finance your social enterprise through social impact bonds. The final three are not relevant to social enterprises and for many of the life stages that you're at. But I thought I'd add them to this list because they are still important as you think about the landscape of financing and what's available. So private equity also picks up later stage startups and enterprises, but they are, like I said, later stage. So if you look at these three in sequence, the first one, seed capital, picks up really early stage startups that have potentially somewhat a level of proof of their business model, but they are really early stage and haven't had much revenue or haven't returned a profit yet. Yeah? Venture capital picks up after seed capital, and that's when you start to get into your more enterprises with much more history. And both of these, seed capital and venture capital, are playing in the equity space, so they're not playing in loans. This is not a loan. This is a funder who will give you money from a social enterprise, but they expect an equity stake, which means they take a piece of ownership in your company, and they expect to get returns in the future, and they will want profits to be able to pay for those returns in the future. But more importantly, what they're looking at more and more in venture capital, or seed capital, venture capital, and certainly private equity, is we're looking for those unicorns, looking for those massive companies that are going to go from zero to hero in a year or two and hit the $1 billion valuations so that we can cash out. That's our intention when we're in the seed capital, venture capital, private equity space, is we want phenomenal growth in these businesses, not in terms of revenues necessarily, but in terms of book value, so that we can sell them at a handsome ransom. So that already, as a social enterprise, becomes a very important thing for you to think about. Is this the right kind of capital for you to go after with that expectation from your financier? Can you grow your enterprise in a year or two to hit those revenues And is this the right thing? Is it going to... The question I always ask, and why I put that strategic intent issue up first, is you need to stay true to your mission. You need to find financiers and find ways of financing your social enterprise that does not divert your mission. And I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush, but generally I find when you're looking at private capital, seed capital, venture capital, private equity, because they have those enormous expectations of growth in very short periods of time, you could divert your mission. I'm not saying it's a given. I'm not saying it necessarily will happen, but you need to stay true to your mission, which is why I put in these points about revenue, DPOs, crowdfunding, and social impact funds. So let's go through these, and I'll paint the landscape for you a little bit, and you can see why I'm saying that some of these are probably more appropriate for you, and why some of them are not. Okay, I realize we're getting close to time, so I'll start speeding up quickly. So just quickly, venture capital, as I've already said, I'm starting with this one not because it's the one logical sequence for how business funding actually works, but because it's the one that we know most commonly. So what we now have seen is that there are 51 venture capital funds operating in Africa at the moment. So there are 51 funds that are active in Africa right now. The second thing that you need to know about the movement in venture capital is that each one of these funds has up to about between 7 and 10 investments from seed to series already on the continent. So these are very active funds. Of these 51 funds, 22 already have headquarters in Africa. So these are venture capital funds that already are running in Africa, but more and more they're setting up their headquarters in Africa. 9 of them have formed since 2016. And here's some interesting ones in the South African context. I'm not sure if the room has heard about what Naspers has been doing, but last week we saw a big announcement that Naspers is setting up a 1.4 billion rand fund to explicitly support businesses that are solving social problems, which is that is an enormous amount of money. It's the biggest fund we've seen yet in South Africa. And to think that this company has set this fund up to specifically go after or support enterprises that are solving social problems is an enormous move or a shift in how we think about what we do in terms of setting up businesses, but also the funding landscape of social enterprises in South Africa. The second example I wanted to mention to you is that perhaps everyone's heard of this one. It's the Rand Merchant Investment Holdings Group. They own the First Rand Group and others. So your FNB, your Momentum, Outsurance, etc., sit in the RMIH portfolio of companies. They've got a business incubator called Alpha Code, and Alpha Code is 2 to 3 weeks ago announced 8 new businesses that will each receive 2 million rands worth of funding. These are startups, so they're fairly early stage. 16 million rands worth of funding. Each one will get $1 million in capital and $1 million worth of business development support. So they're each getting about 2 million rands worth of value through Alpha Code. Alpha Code is specifically looking at businesses in the financial services sector, so it's not across the board. But certainly, we're seeing more and more of these funds come to life, and that's the point of the slide, is to share with you what's going on in venture capital. I want to talk about revenue first, before we move on to other forms of capital, because it's very easy to think about, I'll just go after donor funding, go after seed funding, or raise capital or something. If your intention is to be a social enterprise, the emphasis should be on enterprise and social equally, not social only. We're not a not-for-profit, we're actually a social enterprise. So, a recent study by Oliver Wyman, paid for by the Graunt Network, has found they studied 350 startups in the United States that are working on solving consumers' financial wellness problems. So these are companies much like Jump Credit, which I talked to you about earlier. They studied 350 startups that are working on financial wellness, and they found 3 different revenue models operating in those startups. The first revenue model is the customer pays revenue model, which you can see is at 44% of the companies that are startups in this financial wellness have revenue models of customer pays. There are examples there for you. The one is called Digit, Moneyline, and Kruger. These The direct relationship then between the startup and its customers, and the customer pays, that's the revenue model. The second one is a third-party seller. So that means that, for example, Credit Karma, which helps us to track our credit scores and improve our credit scores in areas like junk credit. So 24% of small businesses or startups, at least, have got third-party sellers as the payment revenue model. That means that if I'm signed up on Credit Karma introduces me to credit cards or loans, and the credit card company or the lender pays Credit Karma for the ability to reach me. So that's a third-party seller payment. The third revenue model that you can think about as you set up your social enterprise is what's called a third-party beneficiary. They found that 9% of businesses have this revenue model. What does that mean? Is, for example, when companies working in financial wellness or employee financial wellness, and they're working in corporations to help those companies get their employees and to fix their personal finances, the company pays the startup to come and do these services for their employees. So that's the third-party beneficiary model, third party that pays, which is the employer in this instance. So those are the three models that I wanted to mention to this forum for thinking about how you build revenue. You are a social enterprise, so you're going to stand and fall on your ability to generate a sustainable business, which means that you have to think about your revenue models. And when we're talking about financing startups, the financing, this is the bread and butter of your business. You want this to be very successful. And this enables other forms of finance as well. Because the stronger your revenues are, the easier it will be for you to secure finance in other forms as well. Briefly, seed capital, I've already mentioned this one. It's very early stage investments, and they're usually provided by angel investors. Last week in Cape Town, the Angel Investment Conference took place, and one of the comments that I saw coming out of that conference was the hope is that there will now be more angel funders in South Africa. I'm not strong on how what the angel funding landscape looks like in South Africa, but we no longer have to be concerned about that so much, because you, as a startup or a social enterprise in South Africa, you can actually access finance from angel lists, which is the example that I put in the top right-hand corner there. You can list yourself and get financing or potential funders through angel list, and that is seed capital. So that is very, very early stage funding. And it's often, there's sort of a compromise here. One is it's very early stage, it's very high risk, but they'll also then demand a much higher equity stake in your social enterprise. Here's this exciting little one that I wanted to mention to you called direct public offerings. DPOs are a trend that I'm keeping my eye on because, think about it this way. When we're talking about IPOs and investments and so on, generally what we default back to is the stock exchange and powerful investors or very powerful, very wealthy people or very, very wealthy and powerful stockbrokers and investment bankers, etc. Direct public offerings take the conversation away from the IPO because it is what we call a sort of democratization of capital. And so what I like really about this model is it is the kind of thing that any business of any size, any community, or any city or any town can do to build or raise finance in its local community. So think about it, for example. If you have a bookshop on the corner of your street, and it's a place that everybody in the community loves, but we know that bookshops are no longer necessarily the flavor of the day as we're moving more to online book purchasing and so on. But you feel as a community, thank you, 2 minutes, got it. As you feel as a community want to support this small business, you can now raise funds directly in your community through a direct public offering. Now, this is not a donation because your DPOs, your investors, are like investors anywhere else. They own a piece, they own shares in your company, so they own some aspect of the equity. But it is a wonderful way, as you think about a social enterprise, and you've got a very strong social mission, to galvanize and mobilize your local community to support your social enterprise and to support your venture. Another way of doing and galvanizing and mobilizing the community is called crowdfunding. You've definitely heard of these. So Kickstarter, Indiegogo, etc. This situation here is not an equity situation. Sometimes it's a donation, or it can be a loan, or in the second example, rewards and pre-sales, a Kickstarter, I offer something on Kickstarter, and essentially I'm offering it to people to buy. So they're paying for the item before the item is even being created. So those are the three forms of crowdfunding: donations, rewards and pre-sales, and the final third one, the peer-to-peer lending. So those are where you're raising loan capital, which I wouldn't advise for businesses in a very early stage, but it is another way of financing a social enterprise. Social impact bonds, very, very new and cutting-edge ways of financing social enterprises. There are two operating in South Africa right now that I know of. Standard Bank's Tutua has got a bond for jobs to enable youth employment. And the second one, which I've just heard about in the Western Cape, is to support early childhood education through a non-profit called Mothers to Mothers. And that's with the Western Cape government. Very quickly, an introduction to social bonds. It is generally paid for by the government, but the government only pays when the results have been achieved. You, as a social enterprise, would then be, in the scheme, you would be the not-for-profit service provider or the social enterprise. The orange block there is where the social enterprise fits in. The funding comes from the investor up front, the social enterprise does the work, the results get assessed, and then the government repays the investor with interest for the performance of that activity. Right? Social impact bonds. Standard Bank Tutua, and the Western Cape one is one that you want to look at. So, in closing very quickly, as I round up my thoughts, as I was thinking about this activity that you're about to undertake, I wanted to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. It's one that gets me through many difficulties, and it's by Marie Curie, the Polish physicist. It's this: life is not easy for any of us, but what of that? We must have perseverance and, above all, confidence in ourselves. We must believe that we're gifted for something, and that this thing must be attained. And those are my final thoughts that I want to leave you. I want to say good luck. You're not alone, and we're all here to help you. Thank you very much.